Before we turned on record, we were talking about Claude and just how fast Claude has become like 10 times smarter than ChatGPT. Yannick, what is your Claude hack? Give me your number one Claude hack.
The biggest thing that I've realized over the last couple of weeks is that you just got to see if it can do something and just let it surprise you. Like if you think that, I don't really know, I don't know if AI can actually do that. Let's just see what happens. And you just hand it to Claude and just say, just go run with this thing. What Claude does so differently, especially if you're using something like Claude Code or Cowork, is that it stacks different tasks on top of each other until it gets to a result. Whereas ChatGPT just kind of figures out your question and gives you an answer. But Claude kind of creates this checklist that it starts working through. And that's kind of been the most magical moment for me where it's like, I wonder if it can do that. And you just try it. And every single time it does do that. Actually, you just keep going further and further down that rabbit hole. And then we spoke about, I think setting up projects is huge, but if you go you want to nerd out even harder, setting up a cursor Claude Code interface on your own machine and then working locally, that has been the unlock because you can actually see what it's referencing. So if you're just in a chat box, then obviously you don't really have control over what it's doing behind the scenes. It's looking at some stuff, it's looking at some transcripts, it's looking at some memory, but you don't really know what it is. But if you're in Cursor, you can actually see a folder structure on the left side. And then if it references a file, you can actually open that file. And Christian, you said you've talked to it about some personal things, and then it mentions that in the podcast transcript that you definitely don't want in there.
Yeah.
You can literally just open the file that it referenced, and you can delete the personal stuff out of it, save it, and then run it again. And so you have much more hands-on control versus just using the chat interface.
It's like if you were, wanting to talk to the smartest person in the world, but you actually want to know what their brain is doing to get you to an answer and saying, what is your brain? What is your thought process? What is your information that you're intaking? And you can see behind the scenes, and then you can engineer that specifically. It's crazy.
Yeah. Show your math, not just a result.
Welcome back to the Inorganic podcast. My name's Christian Hassold.
And I'm Ayelet Shipley.
Imagine selling your agency, then immediately being handed the checkbook to go acquire other agencies. That is exactly what happened to today's guest. He's now living the very rare experience of going from the acquired to the acquirer. His name is Yannick Lorenz. He's the Chief Growth Officer at Vesa Digital, a B2B commerce agency. He's the former founder of Shadow Digital. He's now leading in part the inorganic and the organic strategy for Veza. Yannick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Christian. I love that intro. I've never been able to put it perfectly like that, selling the agency, getting handed the checkbook. I love that.
Don't thank me, thank Claude.
Yeah.
Christian is right now just Claude's mouthpiece as he's going to go through it.
We're all just becoming the AI's vessel at this point.
So this is a really exciting episode for me personally. I once was a founder who went from being the acquired to becoming the acquirer way back in 2017 when I was acquired by Channel Advisor and they put me in the corporate development role. So I've been down this road, but I've never gotten to interview someone in this role. So it's exciting to have you with us today. And I think maybe in setting the stage before we dive into Veza, you should just give us a little bit of background on yourself, who you are as a human and kind of like a little bit more on Veza.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So born and raised in Germany, moved to the US in 2013. Actually came here to play football, college football. After about a year and a half, I realized that I was short and white and I wasn't really going to go anywhere in that career. So then diverted to art school. So dropped out of college twice, then dropped out of art school, moved back to California and just started freelance designing. Like a lot of agency owners, kind of accidental entrepreneur. Before I knew it, I had bigger clients, bigger projects, started bringing on more hands, and I was running an agency. And that agency eventually turned into Shadow Digital, which we can talk more about that story. which then last year sold to Vesa Digital, which then allowed me to step into that M&A role, which I've been doing now for about a year. And now as of a couple of weeks ago, besides the inorganic aspect, I also started taking on the organic aspect because we're starting to roll up sales and marketing. So anything growth related to the platform level. So doing it at Vesa Agency Network level, which we call VAN, instead of doing it on each one of the individual agencies.
Very cool. And before we because that's just like the whole thing, right? I mean, what you've grown and, where you are today. But going back for a second, thinking about Shadow Digital before, you then sold and it went to Veza. When you came into this, right? And you say you art school dropout too and fell into this. How did you build it? Like, were there co-founders? Did you do this on your own? How'd you grow it?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, kind of started just freelance designing. And as I was doing that, it was, I was living in a beach shack with 3 other roommates. I was a CrossFit coach at the time too. So that was kind of like paying the rent. And then whenever I would get a freelance project, that was just beer money on the weekends and just make a little bit of extra money. And eventually that started turning from design is the side hustle to, okay, now the coaching is the side hustle. Eventually the design kept growing. It was actually interesting. The majority of my early clients came from coaching. So I kind of leveraged that opportunity. It's a very prominent gym here in Newport Beach. A lot of people with a lot of money go there. It was a weird dynamic because I'm this 25-year-old dude with a man bun, and coaching all of these CEOs and founders in their 1 hour where they go to the gym. The other 23 hours, they're in charge, but that 1 hour I was in charge. And it kind of created this interesting dynamic where they trusted me. So once we started talking more about design and that I offered that as well, I started building a few relationships there. At the time, my best friend was working at Deloitte. And so he would always help me with just contracts and proposals. And, I was doing websites for $300 and he would say, you got to add a zero to that. So we kind of slowly started growing. Eventually we landed also through a contact at the gym, our first real client, which was a biotech firm here in Huntington Beach. That contract, which my best friend at the time helped me with, kind of turned into something that got big enough for him to quit his job and then also join Shadow as my co-founder. There's kind of a funny little story, which was we pitched ourselves to the biotech firm as Shadow Digital, but there was no Shadow Digital yet. It was just Yannick, the freelancer, and we signed the contract and got a check that was made out to Shadow Digital, but there was no Shadow Digital. So I was literally driving all over town trying to cash this check and they wouldn't let us. So we had to go through the whole process of starting actually the business and registering it and opening the bank account just so we can deposit the check. So all to say, in the early days, it was very much just building the plane while flying it. Until then, yeah, my co-founder came on and we kind of made it official and actually turned it into an agency.
When did you figure out you would need to scale it and how did you go about doing that?
It was the biotech client for sure, because it was the first one where we started making significant money, or what was significant money to us at the time. Like I said, I was doing, $300 websites. I walked into their office and they kind of told me what they wanted. And it was a flyer, like a brochure kind of thing, sales flyer, and a landing page. And they walked me through the requirements and then they said, how much would it be? And I said, I don't know. I got to talk to my co-founder. Like, it depends. You give the old agency adage, right? And they say, well, how about 2,000? And 2,000 at the time would have been great for us. And I would be like, yeah, 2,000 is probably fine. But I kind of kept my poker face on and said, yeah, I think that should work, but let me talk to my co-founder. And their CFO, which was the contact who I knew from the gym, was in the room. And he basically just said, look, we don't have time to really go back and forth and negotiate here. I'm authorized to go up to 20,000. Can you guys do it for 20? And my heart dropped because I'd never seen a number that big in my entire life. I still played it cool, said, I think so. We should be able to make that work, but let me talk to my co-founder. So I walked out, got in the car, was freaking out. And that was kind of like the first big deal that we got with them that rolled into a retainer that lasted a couple of years. So at the beginning, it was really just, we're just working for them. And we have a couple of other clients on the side, but we use that in order to then really figure out who we are as an agency and what we want to do and go through some of those growing pains while being supported by this large client.
I mean, obviously when you started, there was no like, oh, let's exit, right? It was just, let's make some money, and wow, $20,000 is a lot. So when was kind of the first time you thought this could be a sellable asset here, or I would think about an exit?
It was on the other side of a very deep valley that we went through. So 2020 hits, we're in the middle of the project with this biotech firm. And we've been doing everything in person, their offices were up the street from us. So it was kind of part of it that we go in there and we whiteboard, and all of a sudden we're doing it via Zoom. Their CEO, founder CEO, is an incredibly smart, genius child. I think he's going to be the president of the United States one day, mark my words right here. But he has real control issues and is not very good at getting out of the way when it comes to these projects, and micromanages everything. So long story short, that project blew up and we lost that relationship. Everything kind of crumbles, goes back down to the floor. We lose our biggest clients. We got to figure out what we want to do. We were at a WeWork at the time, and WeWork was doing these accelerator programs locally in San Francisco. But because of COVID, they did the first one online. We had to build a relationship with a couple of the people at WeWork, and they invited us to that. Through that, we met one of our mentors who basically started working with us on, at the time, we were a everything for everyone agency, right? Like someone needed something, we would just figure it out, watch a YouTube video, figure out how much we're going to charge for it, and then do it. We were doing everything from design, branding, content, podcast production. I mean, you name it, we did it. And she asked us one question and just said, what makes you guys different? And we just looked at each other and were like, well, it's us. Like, we're awesome. People want to work with us. And she said, well, that's definitely not enough. You guys have to specialize, which then sent us down this rabbit hole, which allowed us to find Webflow. And I like to say Webflow found us, which then became kind of like our specialization. In 2020, Webflow rolled out their partner program. We were one of the first 200 partners to roll out of the beta with them. And it was a gold rush. We were getting 5, 10, 15 leads sometimes per week just through the partner program. And it kind of felt like everything we touched turned to gold. We scaled very quickly, hired very quickly, and so did Webflow. So the partner program grew, going from 200 partners to 2,000 partners with the same amount of leads. You do the math, with an agency that hasn't really built their own lead gen channels. So fast forward, end of 2021, we're at 10 people. We have the nicest WeWork glass corner office that you've seen. We're flying a little bit too close to the sun, and kind of everything starts come crashing down on us. My co-founder leaves, goes back to the 9-to-5 world. I'm kind of holding the bag with over 6 figures in debt, SBA loans, credit card loans at the time, start getting kind of laying off some of the team members. I kept a couple of them around, trying to see if I can turn things around, and eventually just got rid of everybody. And it was back down to me and a laptop, which is where it all started. And at that point, 6 figures in debt with me and a laptop sitting at my desk, I kind of vowed to myself, I'm going to rebuild this thing in a different way, and I'm going to build it as a sellable asset. And I think that's the best thing that any agency owner can do, or I think any business owner can do, really, because it doesn't mean that you have to sell it, but it will make you think about your business from an investor lens versus an emotional lens, which will make you make different decisions as you're growing it. And then once you get it to the point where it's a sellable asset, you're still fully in control. You can continue running it yourself. You can put a CEO in place, or you can actually go sell it, but it just gives you that optionality. So I had to kind of go through the valley in order to come through to that realization and then rebuild it in a different way.
Well, one, I want to thank you for your honesty here on that valley. We don't talk about that enough as founders. Things that just don't go as planned. I say bad things happen, but these are transformative events. Sometimes you really kind of have to come all the way back down to zero and have a kind of a panic moment when you see like the weight of bricks of having that amount of debt on your hands and having to figure out how to claw your way back out rather than just give up. So many people would give up, yet there's this very select few of real true grit founders who say, I'm going to fight my way out of this, and I'm going to find a great outcome here. So I congratulate you on having the fortitude to fight your way through that. How did you get connected to Veza? How did they find you?
Yeah, that's another funny story. So At first, to your point, Christian, I appreciate you saying that. And one thing that got me through it, Alex Hormozy, if you guys are familiar with him, he's kind of like the marketing guy. But at the time, he was also putting out a lot of just philosophical stuff. And I remember he put out a post which basically just said, if you're going through a hard time right now, just remember at some point it's going to make for a great story. And that's kind of what got me going. If it's just smooth sailing, you and I, or all three of us probably wouldn't be on this podcast right now because it's not a very interesting story. But it's like you fought the battles, you've slayed the dragon, and then you get to move on from there. So if you're going through something right now where maybe the business isn't going so well, or you're in the valley right now, just remember at some point this is going to make for a very cool story if you come out victorious on the other side. To Veza's point, so we were doing some outreach on LinkedIn, and we were actually going after other agencies as white label partners. So we would go after design agencies, branding agencies, UX shops, you name it, and say, hey, we're this Webflow development agency. If you want a white label partner, let's talk. And my executive assistant was running it. She was supposed to filter out all other Webflow agencies. Veza slipped through the crack. The founder, Stefan, got a message from me on LinkedIn pitching myself as a white label agency. He realized that it was an automated message, basically just said, cute message, but you've actually been on our radar. We should chat, which started the conversation. So it was by accident that Veza found us and that we started the conversation, but it all worked out at the end.
Awesome. And the conversation to go through the acquisition, talk us a little bit about how they evaluated you as an acquiree and how you evaluated them as acquirer through the lens of culture fit, vision alignment, how did you kind of work out kind of how this would come together in a way that felt good for you, given everything you'd been through?
Yeah. When Stefan and Veza approached us, I thought we were too early. I let you ask, when did I think that we were going to sell? I was building it for that. And I thought that maybe in 2, 3, 5 years, we were going to be able to get there, but I didn't think that we were there yet. And Stefan approached me and we started having the conversation, which is when I learned about acqui-hiring and how that plays into the M&A space, because really the agency still wasn't that big on any scale. So we started having the conversation. I thought it was too early. Eventually, first we said, yeah, let's do it at some point next year. This was in the summer of 2024. Then it was, well, we'll do it at Q1 of 2025. And then it was, let's just do it right now. And then we ended up closing in November with it being effective January 1st. I think I learned a lot very quickly as you go through the process of selling your agency. You try to understand kind of both sides of the process. The acqui-hiring part, I think, was the biggest piece for me, because I remember a conversation with Stefan where I was I think we were talking about multiples and valuation at that point. And I made this whole point about, this is the business I've built, and here's the recurring revenue I have, and here's our profit margins. And he said, look, all of that is great, but really what we're buying here is you. And I think that especially for early founders is important to hear, because I spent way too much time on self-improvements and reading self-help books and listening to podcasts and trying to be the best version of myself that I could possibly be. And sometimes it kind of feels like a waste of time. But in that moment, it was all this work that I've done into myself is now actually going to start paying off. So I think a lot of the value for me came from them being able to see that. And then the other value for me came from the fact that I had met a lot of other founders and entrepreneurs, obviously, and some of them are better than me at some things, and I'm better than them at other things. When I started having conversations with Stefan, it was the first time in my life where I thought, him and I have been playing the exact same game for the exact same time, and he's way ahead of me. So how did he do that? He's winning. There's something that he knows that I don't know, which really got me excited about the opportunity. And I thought that there was a culture fit there, the way that we were thinking about growth and approaching business, and kind of from this more investor-led angle, building a sellable business. The vision that Stefan had for Veza aligned with the vision that I had. And then once on top of that, we started having a conversation about, hey, how about you come on and run our M&A process? That was kind of the cherry on top for me, where then I thought, yeah, I have to take this opportunity.
Your introspection is off the charts here. I love that. I mean, so you're talking about a lot of the complementary things that really seem to come together in that they really valued you as a human being. The cultural alignment was your cultural alignment with Stefan and with what he was building as a business. Was there any point in the deal process or any specific issue that was kind of a hang up that made you say, again, I said it's too early, and maybe this is too early, and maybe this is the one thing that's going to make me say, I'm not sure this is the right time?
The biggest thing was the fact that I was running the agency like a lifestyle business, meaning I was taking a lot of cash off the table at the end of the month and at the end of the year. It was financing my lifestyle. We had fantastic margins, but we were also stifling growth by doing that. And I was kind of making that trade-off at the time consciously. When Stefan came in and obviously looks at the situation from a buyer perspective, that doesn't really work anymore. We need to take the cash and put it back into the business. So I think the biggest hang up that we were having in the conversation was, look, this is how much money I'm making right now. If you want to continue, if you want me to continue on, I need to make at least this much money with some sort of upside for me to, still do this, because I am an entrepreneur and I need to kind of like see, okay, if I do this and this is where things are going to be going. So I think that was the biggest. It was just from a financial perspective, going from a lifestyle business to, okay, we're actually building something bigger here. And it was a lot of me growing and thinking about business differently that I had to force myself into, like, okay, let's try to see it from this other side. And instead of just, what if it's not just about the cash that I'm taking off the table now, but what if it's where we can go in 12, 18, 24 months together? And if we leave a little bit more chips on the table, the jackpot at the end of the day is going to be bigger for all of us.
Newsflash for founders who are planning to exit their businesses: leave some cash in the business. Leave some cash in the business. It's your business to run. It is your profit that you're generating. But just remember that credit card you swipe when you join that private club, that, those dinners that you put on the business charge account that are kind of business, kind of not. If you're going to sell, someone's going to look at it and say, yeah, that's owner's comp. Great. Your EBITDA is 0.
Yep. Exactly.
You can get through it, but the businesses that tend to have better outcomes are sitting on cash, are flowing cash, and someone can look at the bank account and see that cash sitting there, which is hard to do when you've been through the journey that you just described, where you have massive amounts of debt and a lot of, hard climbing out of to do. You want to kind of be able to celebrate those wins, but it's really measured. Again, very honest of you to share that.
Yeah, people ask me if I can go back and do it again. Would I do anything differently? I give two answers. The first answer is exactly that. I wish I would have just not upgraded. It's the most obvious one, but I wish I would have just not upgraded my own lifestyle so quickly that it required more cash flow into my personal bank account. I wish I would have just practiced the marshmallow test just a little bit longer and just kind of leave more cash in the business. I would have been able to grow it much quicker. And by the time we would have gotten to an exit, it would have been much bigger. So I think that it's all about how long can you delay that gratification. And then the other part of that answer is always, I would have done the exact same thing, just without all of the emotional anguish. Because if I can just go through that again now, knowing where it's going to end up, it's like, this is kind of fun. I'm just playing a game, but at the time, it feels like you're dying. So being able to go back and just kind of figure out, okay, this is just business. It's just a game. You're just kind of playing chess here and just having fun while doing it, because, you always look back in more nostalgic ways. But man, if I can just start it again from scratch right now and just build it all, it would be so much fun. And I think enjoying those early days is important.
I think it's interesting though, is like now you're in this phase and in this role now where you get to almost be playing chess in a sense. Like you still have that upside and you still have that connection into the business, but you are playing this different game of inorganic growth. Right. And you're playing the M&A game. And first of all, like, how did you say when he said, I would love for you to run the M&A strategy and like that's what you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis? What made you think, oh, I definitely know I can do that? is a big boys game too, right? Like it is a traditional game too. So what made you say, okay, I know I can do this. I have the skill set, the ability, and the knowledge to be able to go and do so? Or did you say I need to go and like figure out the education piece around how to do it?
For sure. To be honest with you, I wake up in the morning sometimes and just can't believe how lucky I am that I get to do it in this way, where I'm learning the M&A process from incredible people who are kind of writing the book on digital agency. I get to do it, like Christian said, with someone else's checkbook. I don't have to risk my own chips, really. Obviously, I have some skin in the game, but I kind of get to fly a little bit with other people's checkbooks. And then I have this amazing team around me supporting me from a finance, legal, and everything else that we need during the due diligence process. So sometimes I got to pinch myself on how lucky I am that I get to do this. And to be honest with you, when we started the conversation, it was first going to be an integration role. So all Webflow agencies in the future that we acquire, we want you to run the integration. I started educating myself, and integration did not sound like it was a ton of fun. So I went one level up from there and started learning more about M&A. And throughout the entire selling process, I tried to just learn as much as I possibly can and try to get as much information from the other side. And I think by the way that I was asking questions and thinking about the deal and trying to come up with creative ways to make it happen, Veza, Stefan saw something in me where it's like, hey, we kind of want this guy to go and do this for us afterwards. So when they proposed that to me, it's always been something that I would love to get into, but it almost felt like this black box that if you didn't go to Harvard and then went to JP Morgan, you're not going to be doing. So I never thought that was something that I'm going to be doing, to be honest with you. And then when that opened up and I started learning more about it, and it's like, oh, it's not just Pepsi and Disney buying companies, but there's M&A happening at every size of business. I started getting really excited about it, started doing all the education, and then Veza was the best of both worlds because on the one hand side, they want me to do it, but on the other hand side, they also realized that I'd never done it before and that they would support me with the resources, with the coaching, with the leadership, and with the team in order to actually go execute.
So then talk to us about now Veza's inorganic strategy. So funding sources, right? Do you have private equity backing, independent? Where are you guys in terms of your growth strategy? What's the future? Talk to us through the whole thing from beginning to now.
Yeah, so it all started with Veza as an agency growing to about 60 people. Shadow, my agency, was the first acquisition that happened. That was early 2025. And then we did 3 more acquisitions throughout last year. It's a traditional agency roll up. We're looking to get to an exit as a group in the next 18 to 24 months, doing about 5 to 6 acquisitions per year. We're looking to add about $2 million of EBITDA inorganically this year. So agencies anywhere between 500 to $1 million in EBITDA is currently what we're looking for. And really anything in the B2B commerce space that is web focused. So last year, all the agencies that we acquired were Webflow agencies, but we're now going outside of that a little bit and trying to figure out how can we support our clients outside of just Webflow. So design, development, but also SEO. AEO is obviously a hot topic. We're looking at a couple of CRO agencies. We're even looking at clay agencies to build automations and go-to-market strategies for our clients, because the reason why I am now in the CGO role is because I pitched a van first strategy at the end of last year, which got a lot of traction with leadership, which is basically I copied like an Accenture model, which is we're going to come in on the van level from a strategic perspective, almost more like a consultant, saying, here's the plan, here's what we think we should do with your digital presence. But then we own all these agencies that can then actually execute and deliver on that strategy as well. So that's the shift that we're going through right now, and that we're really excited for going into 2026.
So as you're then going and acquiring right now, because you're acquiring in a really interesting space, right? This 500K to $1 million realm, I call it like the wild, wild west of the agency world, because any deal structure goes. And I don't know if you can share this or not, but from when you're talking to these sellers, like what are the kind of structures you're presenting for this? Like, let's say 5 to 700, and then the, let's say 800, 900 to $1 million range.
Yeah, I love that question because I think I'm privileged again because I had such a unconventional upbringing in the M&A world. I kind of learned through my own deal and then through a couple of deals that we've done. All of it is programmatic M&A, meaning all the deals that we source ourselves. We don't really work with any private equity firms or bankers or investment banks in any way. All the deals that we've done and all the deals that we're going to do are all self-sourced. So it's me going out to my network. It's me building connections, networking, going on LinkedIn, and most likely approaching founders that are probably in the same spot that I was in, which is we're not ready to sell yet. And then pitching Veza and the division that we have for Vesa Agency Network and explaining to them what kind of upside they could have by joining us now rather than later, which then enables you to get really creative with the deal making. And so everything that we've done up until now has just been debt. And then we do seller notes and safe notes as part of the deals as well. How those three components come together all depend on the type of deal. We literally did a deal, or we have 2 deals in the works right now. Same type of agency, same size, same team, same value that they would bring to us, but the founders want 2 drastically different things. The first founder wants to just take as many chips off the table and get cash. The other founder wants to just, I don't care about the cash at all. I want to roll it all over and I want to just go on this ride with you guys. And to Christian's point earlier, if you can leave chips on the table, you're going to get a much better deal. So, one deal is literally basically 50% cash up front, 50% in a seller note. The other deal is 10% cash up front just to give him a little bit of something. And then it's 90% just in a safe note that he's going to roll with us. So it's fun because it's just creative deal making. And to the point that I made at the beginning of this, which is I'm lucky because I kind of got an unconventional start. My mind isn't really like, this is what the deal is and this is how we need to structure it. I kind of come into every deal like, let's figure this thing out. And then we kind of just put the puzzle pieces together from there. So instead of trying to force a founder into a structure, we really try to get creative with every deal and find something that's win-win. And just to make that last point, and I didn't mention this earlier, the biggest learning that I had from selling my own agency is how much of a win-win process this can really be. Going into it, I really thought that it was going to be like the movies or like a TV show where I have to out negotiate the other side and you got to play hardball and like all these different things. And if I win, they lose, or the other way around. And I quickly realized that that's not the way it goes at all. If you're in a position where it feels like that, run, because it doesn't need to feel that way. If you find somebody where you have a great relationship with the other side, then it's just creative deal making. And then there's different levers that you can pull. And I would come to the Veza team and say, this is really important to me. And then they would say, that's fine. Then we're just going to move this lever down a little bit. And then I said, that's fine. I don't care about that lever. And then you kind of just keep doing that. I think about it like a switchboard in a music studio where you have all the little sliders. You just keep sliding one up and the other one slides down and you just keep moving it around until both sides feel like, yeah, this is where we want it to be.
A little bit of what you're talking about here is kind of the, what is the state of play for a, negotiation? I like to describe them as these, Richard Gere from Pretty Woman bankers from the late 80s and 90s who liked deals where you were going to tear apart the company into 20 pieces and sell off the scraps, and really hard negotiations,
right.
Starting on off-market terms and saying like, well, I don't believe in starting in middle grounds because if you start in middle grounds, you always lose. But I think that's one thing that you and I probably have in common is that being an acquired founder can either make you a better acquirer because you're more empathetic to the acquiree, or it can be, an Achilles heel because you take weak positions. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that in the early days, throughout the first 6 to 9 months of last year, I leaned into the second one that you just mentioned, which is kind of making me a weak acquirer because I still remembered all the emotions and everything that I went through. So it's like, oh, well, this guy's he's feeling this and he's feeling that. I think I chased a lot of deals that were dead for a long time before I knew it, tried to make things work. The very first deal that we got into our pipeline into due diligence closed, and like quick within a couple of weeks. So I was like, this is easy. I'm just going to do a bunch of these. And then I lost the next 3. So I think I got kind of, I got lucky with the first one, which then also made me just chase everything else after that. The thing that I'm going through now is just saying no to a lot of deals and saying no much quicker in order not to waste our time and not to waste their time either. Having a much more defined buy box as to what are we looking for in agencies, what are the red flags. And then that allows you to get away from, once again, kind of the emotional aspect of it and shifting towards just more of a data-driven approach, if you will. But at the end of the day, it's just having a system that allows me to say go or no go instead of having to make a gut decision on something like that, because it shouldn't be a gut decision, whether you are, a soft founder or it makes you a hard acquirer. I think at the end of the day, you kind of need just a process to follow, and that process will tell you yes or no. With that being said, obviously there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. And it's like, this is technically a no-go, but here's what I see in this company. Let's try to make it work. And those tend to be the fun ones. And then you kind of challenge yourself on how to still figure it out. But I think to answer your question more succinctly, in the early days, it made me soft until I kind of learned a lot more about what the other side actually looks like. And I believe that being clear is being kind. So being able to tell founders, look, just not a fit right now, here's what you need to work on, is much better than trying to tell them some pie in the sky story and waste their time for a few months on due diligence when I kind of know the deal isn't really going to go through anyways.
You've talked about what works, and you've just hinted at, things that you say no to. Give me one reason why you're frequently giving a hard no, not right now.
Yeah. Biggest reason is just not knowing your financials. If I'm on a conversation with a founder and, we're talking about what's your revenue last year and what's the gross margin on that and what's your EBITDA and what part of that is recurring and how much of that revenue is coming from your largest client, how do you guys scope projects, what's your average profit margin on something like that. If they don't know, then it's kind of like, okay, they're just flying blind here. And then we're not really going to be able to know. The second piece, the biggest thing for us is recurring revenue. It's something that I learned throughout my process as well, is one-time project revenue kind of almost doesn't matter. You're going to get like a one-time multiple on that. The only thing that matters is recurring revenue. And I think for agencies on top of that, it's recurring profit. I think one of the biggest things if you're on Twitter, or if you're on LinkedIn, everyone talks about ARR and MRR, and everyone's just talking about scaling revenue. And I think specifically that's for venture-backed startups, that makes sense because that's where your KPIs are. But for agency and service-based businesses, if you're not taking home money at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what your ARR and MRR is. It just matters what is your profit at the end of the day. And if you don't have that, if you don't have clear visibility into what that number is, and if you can't show me how it's going to recur and compound over the next 12, 24 months, then there's most likely not a deal to be had.
The scariest thing that happens when you're evaluating businesses is finding out that someone has created a $3 to $4 million business and is not financially literate. Yeah. It's shocking. It's shocking.
But it's the most common.
But it happens all the time.
Yeah.
It just bemuses me, but that's the world we live in. There are thousands and thousands of agencies. So of course there's going to be some portion of this happens. So Yannick, we've had a great discussion. How should potential acquirees who might be interested in being a part of the Vesa platform get in touch with you?
Yeah. So either on LinkedIn, Yannick Lorenz on LinkedIn, you guys are going to be able to find me there if you spell my name right. If not, to keep it simple, it's just the letter Y at vesadigital.com. You can shoot me an email. Happy to have a conversation. I absolutely love doing this. So if you're a founder, if you're even just thinking about it, or if you're facing issues in your business, or you have some challenges, you have questions about this, I love having these kind of conversations, if that wasn't clear today. So feel free to reach out and let's just have a chat.
Yannick Lorenz, what a great journey from the acquiree to the acquirer, from Shadow to Vesa, an amazing platform. Really sharing such an incredible, honest story today. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for coming on with Ayelet and I. To all our listeners out there, thanks for listening to this episode of the Inorganic podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, like, subscribe, share, wherever you listen. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Inorganic podcast.